Welcome to Team Building Cultures, the podcast designed to deliver tools and tips for improving team communication, collaboration, and fostering a culture where teams thrive. Now, here's your host, Beverly Hathorn, owner of Strategic HR Consultants.
Hello, listeners, and thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Team Building Cultures. I am your host, Beverly Hathorn, owner of Strategic HR Consultants, where we believe that an organization's culture is the soil in which all things grow. Today, I'm very excited to be speaking with the very prestigious Miss Kelly Charles Collins. Kelly is passionate about creating inclusive cultures where every person and every voice matters. With a background spanning over 2 decades as an employment law trial attorney, she brings a wealth of legal and corporate experience to her work. Kelly's expertise lies in empowering leaders and teams to shatter the internal silence that often surrounds difficult conversations and toxic situations in the workplace. Through her dynamic presentations, training programs, and workshops, Kelly empowers leaders and employees to disrupt unconscious bias and master the art and the skill of engaging in courageous conversations. Whether it's discussing unconscious bias, race, performance, relationships, creating a safe, inclusive, and accountable culture requires open, honest conversations. And Kelly's going to talk to us today about how we can get that done. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me, Beverly. This is awesome.
Yes, I look forward to talking to you. So tell me first about the Convo Catalyst.
So the Convo Catalyst is my experience for employees and leaders to really dive into the art and skill of communication. So you mentioned that in the beginning. What I realized from being an employment law attorney is that the conversations that are not had or the conversations that are had inappropriately are what really are destroying our cultures, right? And so when I was thinking about how do we best pull this together, how do we make sure that organizations have what I call conversational cultures, I was thinking about the fact that I believe that, open hearts change minds one convo at a time. And so the whole thing about Convo Catalyst is to get people talking, right? And to really give them the skills, because it's not that people don't want to have conversations. They're afraid to have the conversations because they don't know, if it's going to destroy a relationship. Are they going to be retaliated against? There's a lot of fear and trepidation that comes with this. So the Convo Catalyst is a way to help them really gain those skills and it's not even so much like releasing the fear, because we're going to have fear, but is to give them the courage, to embolden them to have the conversations and be able to do that without causing collateral damage.
I see. Okay, so yeah, and I can see where that would definitely be important. So, how do we build conversational cultures, and who kicks that off? Who owns that process, or who, does one particular person or organization facilitate such? How do we come about getting that done?
So everyone in the organization owns this, right? Every single person owns the responsibility for engaging effectively in conversations. Now, all the conversations are not going to be these deep conversations. However, I always say there's macro cultures and micro cultures inside of organizations. So the macro culture comes from leadership, from the executives, from the mission of the organization. However, you have these micro cultures, right? So it might be a team that has its own culture. It might be a department that has its own culture. It might be a project group that have their own culture. And inside of those cultures are also informal leaders. And so we have to understand that all of these things are happening within the organization, and that there are different conversations that are happening or conversations that are not happening. And so when you think about developing a conversational culture, one of the things is that people have to feel that they can have a conversation about a difficult topic and not feel that they're going to be retaliated against for it. They're going to be ostracized. They're going to be blacklisted. They're going to be the next one out the door. Now, so that comes from the macro culture, right? So that feeling of belonging and safety is one that has to be created from the top down, right? And then everyone underneath that is also responsible. So bottom up, top down, everyone is responsible for ensuring that that culture stays in as a safe place, that people do feel that they can speak and that they can say the things that they need to say, whether somebody else likes it or not, whether it's going to be, it's going to rub somebody the wrong way. So it's a real, you mentioned in the beginning about, just like the soil. And I love that you said that, right? Because it really is that. What are we planting? What are the seeds that we're planting in our employees, in our leaders about what they're able to do, how they're able to show up every single day, how they're able to communicate. So if that soil, right, is not nurtured, if that soil is not, taken care of from the very beginning, from the foundation, then no matter what we put into it, it's not going to thrive, right? So we can have the soil, but if we don't nurture it properly, it's not going to thrive. And it's the same thing with our cultures. If we don't take the time to ensure that our people feel safe, that our people feel like they belong, that our people feel that they are included, and that they can say what's on their mind, then that soil is not going to nurture a thriving environment.
Yeah, I'm in complete alignment with you on that, and how I came up with that phrase, because it's my original phrase, I guess you could say, is because I was in a toxic culture in an organization, and I saw that certain people were valued and certain people weren't. The problem was, I don't know how they determined that pecking order or whatever you want to call it. I don't know how they went about it, but I did notice that some people who had a great deal of knowledge and a great deal to offer didn't feel valued, so the organization never got the benefit of everything that they had to offer. And that was one of the saddest byproducts of that toxic culture. And
Mm-hmm.
when you have such a culture and you've got great people, if you haven't built those relationships and you haven't opened things up, like you said, where people can talk and they can bring things to the table, because some of your greatest innovation and creativity and thoughts and responses for problems, it's going to come from your people who actually do the work. But if you've established a culture where you've communicated to them in whatever way that their opinion doesn't matter,
Yeah.
and if they dare speak against you, this could happen, then they're not going to speak against it. You're not going to get what they have to offer. So
Yeah.
I love this topic of the convo catalyst. I think that's wonderful. And, organizations would do well, especially the macro cultures, to
Mm-hmm.
establish that base, because the microculture will then follow suit, so
Yeah.
especially that. So yeah.
And just a thought around that too, as you talk about the soil, like, that everybody's responsible for it. And sometimes it will do well for the macro culture, so the executives, to listen to the micro cultures, right? And understand, because as you said, they're the ones doing the work. They're on the ground every single day, making sure that your mission, your vision, your goals are being reached. And when you were talking about, why some people were, revered and some were just ignored. A lot of that comes from our biases, right? So we have these unconscious biases that cause us to do that. We like who we like. We don't like who we don't like. And so we will gravitate towards those people. We will give them, the assignments. We will speak their names in rooms. We'll be looking out for them. And to your point, when we don't have a culture where everyone feels that they're included, you are losing out on so much. There is so much brain power right? And sometimes we think because somebody is in a particular position that means that they don't have anything to say, they have nothing of value, they have nothing to contribute. But there's so many people working in organizations who are working in the wrong roles, and because people don't feel that they can speak up, because people don't feel that they can have conversations, they don't say, hey, listen, in a former life I did this, or, I've done this, or I have these types of skills, right? So, for example, I could be in somewhere, and if I never say, that I'm an attorney or that I have 24 years as a trial lawyer, right? And people don't know that about me, and I'm in a space where I feel that I can't really speak up. And, if I say something, it's going to be taken the wrong way. Look at what they could miss out on, right? In terms of me having this level of expertise. It's the same thing that's happening in organizations throughout the country. And if you really think about when we talk about all the diversity that's in our organizations, and you think about people who have immigrated to this country from, all around the world. And I've had conversations with so many people who, they were they came from another country, and they were lawyers and doctors and accountants and all the things in their country. And then they came here and they couldn't, either they didn't want to take the bar, or they couldn't, or whatever it is, right? But these people have like all of this expertise and experience. If we don't have these cultures where they're conversational, people can talk about like, yeah, this is what I've done, this is who I am, and this is how I can contribute. Right. So it's not always about a toxic situation. It's not always about a difficult issue. It's just really being able to have conversations, period, in a space where people feel that they'll be heard. So they really do miss out. Organizations really do miss out when we don't have these types of conversational cultures.
And, it's a shame because not only is the organization missing out, but of course the employee is missing out on growth and development opportunities, and opportunities to move forward and advance their career. And then you also create in that, let's say, once vibrant, aggressive, outgoing person, you also create some kind of sub-personality in them that they just kind of start to shrink. They just start to, just shrink and shrink and shrink until they're almost unnoticeable. So now not only has the organization missed out on the opportunities that they bring, but now you've completely like reverted this once powerful person. And I know that there are people out there who'll say, well, I'm strong and nobody can change that, but maybe, yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
It's possible. There is a tool, there is a culture out there that can revert your personality to someone. And it's usually in those situations where there is no psychological safety, where you don't feel comfortable speaking up, especially if you're going to be the lone wolf, or do you know that your idea is not going to be well accepted, and you're going to have this whole other group of people going, that's ridiculous. What are you talking about? No, we're not going to do that. So there's not many people who will step out into that and bravely take that on. There are some, there are quite a few, but as you do that, and you continue to get shot down, and other people see you get shot down, now you've taken that entire group of people and silenced them, which is, just really a terrible thing to have happen. Yeah, that's just really scary. So when we talk about these conversations, how do we know which are the most important for us to have? Is someone looking at the organization, caring enough to say, I think there's a lot of bias going on here, and I think we need to start some training and we need to have some conversations? How do we know what organizations should be talking about?
Well, I think organizations have to look at what's happening in their own organization, right? So there are certain things that we all need to have conversations about. If we realize that we have an environment that is hostile towards, certain groups of people, or there's harassment that's happening, there's a culture of sexual harassment, those are things that obviously can expose an organization to legal risk, right? So any conversation or anything that can expose an organization to legal risk is something that needs to be addressed. Now, how that's addressed may be a little bit different than just a general conversation, because you may have to have other people involved. So you may have to have legal counsel involved, you may have to have HR involved to ensure that those conversations go the right way. But in terms of, looking at your organization and trying to see where are the gaps, some of that might come from just having conversations with the people in the organization, like, hey, how are you feeling? What's going on? What's happening around here? And also, one of the things I always tell my clients, like, I listen, right? I'm a very good listener. And so you have to listen for what's being said, listen for what's not being said. And you also have to listen between the lines, right? So there are things that we see in the organization and we kind of just shut it out. Like, that's not such a big deal. Or somebody says something, and because you don't like that person or you don't think highly of that person, you kind of just shut that out. So we have to look at, each organization has to look at what is happening in our culture. What is being impacted? Do we see that people are leaving? So do we see that we have diversity, right? So we bring in diverse people, but there's also, it's like a revolving door. They come in, they go out. If you see that that's happening, then there's a conversation that needs to be had about what it is that is being said to them and told to them in the recruiting and hiring process that is out of alignment with the environment that they have come into, right? There's obviously a disconnect. It's the same with any type of, any group of people. So that's one way to understand, okay, if we're having a retention issue, that's a problem. If you're having, you're getting demand letters, you're getting EEOC charges, you're getting lawsuits, you need to look at that. Like, okay, what is happening there? Why is it that this is a very risk? Why are we having so many risk issues in our organization? What is happening? Who's doing what? Do we have people in our organization who are causing these types of environments? Also look at whether or not people are just even speaking to each other. Like, is it just, people are just not communicating. People are not telling you. People are not performing up to standards. People are not meeting their goals. There are so many, they always say success leaves clues, but problems leave clues too. Right? Issues leave clues. And so if you look at your organization and think about, like, what is it that you have in your strategic plan? What are our goals? What are our missions? And then looking at, okay, well, why is it that we're not meeting those? You will figure out what are the things that you need to work on inside of your organization. Obviously, there's always a diversity issue, unconscious bias. Those things will never go away. Those things are there. Legal risk is there. But look in your organization and see what other things are happening. What other things are impacting your bottom line? Because, they're all companies obviously want to know their bottom line. So there's productivity, there's retention, there's bottom line, those types of things that are always coming up, and see where the changes started happening and really have conversations with people around that. It might be an individual conversation. It might be small group conversations. It might be a town hall. And be prepared. Be prepared and be open to hearing things that you don't like. And then not take that and retaliate, or not take that information and don't do anything about it. That is a disservice, and you might as well not have the conversation in the first place.
Yes, heard loud and clear. Definitely, I am a person who believes in, I lean very strongly on relationships and communication. So if you're building leaders, if you're building relationships in your organization and within your teams, some of this stuff will come to surface just by default. Some of this will come up. But, if you're having things like exit interviews and employee surveys, and you're checking out things like performance, maybe one person, when they were in this group, they performed well. Suddenly you move them and they're not performing so well as have other people who moved to that group. Maybe that's something that you need to look at. But I like when you say success leaves clues, but so does problems. Problems definitely leave clues, but you've got to be attentive and you've got to be open and paying and building relationships in order to see these clues, or else they'll float on the surface, but they won't be really discovered. So yeah.
Can I just say something, Beverly? You're talking about exit interviews. There are a lot of organizations that do exit interviews, and oftentimes that's too late, right? We need to be having these conversations during somebody's employment so that we don't get to the point where we have this exit interview and we're like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. I didn't even know that was going on, right? So just like you can set aside the time and the energy and the bandwidth to have an exit interview and somebody's going out the door, have those types of interviews, conversations while people are there, right? You should still want to know those types of things. You want to be able to catch it before they're like, yeah, I'm out, right? I am out. And when they're at that point, a lot of people, when they're at that point and they're going to exit, like they're going to give it to you, right? They're going to give you everything. But if you had been paying attention, you would have seen these things. If you had just had conversations, you would have seen these things because they do leave clues, right? And sometimes it's like just a little whisper, and sometimes you're being knocked over your head, but you just like, not going to deal with it.
Yeah, most definitely. And when you do those employee surveys, if you take action on the things that your employees are telling you, sometimes employees don't feel comfortable voicing they think that they'll be identified by something that they say. So usually if you have a third party, that kind of helps get a little more data for the organization. But a lot of times employees either feel that they might be identified and then negatively impacted, or they don't have enough faith in the organization to think that anything they say is going to work. So at that point, it's almost better if they were to just maybe seek another role, because once that mindset has set in, it can be contagious. It can spread throughout, a bunch of people who feel the same way about a certain leader or about a certain practice or process. They'll all get together and they'll discuss consistently, why they feel this way. And then that just kind of starts to taint their day and starts to taint their thinking and their feeling about their organization. So these things need to be revealed, addressed. They need to be put out in the open. They need to be discussed. So what would you say to an employee who is experiencing some sort of, I don't know, disparate treatment, or has been the subject of bias, or just feels that their culture is not a culture of growth and one that is about employees and growth and development? What would you say to that employee? How could they kick the ball off, so to speak?
Yeah. So this goes right into my perfect framework for conversations, right? For courageous conversations, and really thinking about first preparing for this conversation. So if you're having this issue, you have a responsibility to speak up, right? Because people don't read minds, and even if they, kind of think they know what's going on, they can misinterpret. And so you have to prepare for this conversation and thinking about, okay, great, I need to go say something about this particular issue. You have to think about, why do you want to do it now? Who do you need to speak to? What is the reason that I'm going to have this conversation? So what is my intention, my purpose for having this conversation? And then what is the objective? So when we're talking about the perfect framework, it's prepare, engage, reflect. So in the preparation phase, two of the things to really be to be concerned about are the intention, so why, and then the objective. What do I want to get out of this conversation? So when you think about that and you have those two things, they're like the bookends, and they will direct the tone and tenor of the conversation. Because sometimes what happens is we're so upset because something has been happening, nobody's doing anything about it, it's been going on and on and on. And now you've gotten to the point where you're like, it's got to come out, right? I'm Jamaican. And so there's, we say pressure bust pipe, right? And so, at some point, people have just had it. And so they want to say something. However, we have to really think about that because we want to be mindful of what it is that we're trying to get out of it. Listen, if what you want to do is just burn the whole place down, well, then go for it, right? If that's how you feel about it. But if what you're really trying to do is cause change, if you're trying to cause change, then you need to think about that and what is the best way for you to be able to get that. And then when you're having the conversation, so when you're engaging in the conversation, understanding that this is a dialogue and not a debate, right? The goal is not to have a fight. The goal is not to be like, I'm right, you're wrong, you're right, I'm wrong, because we'll never get anywhere. Now, it doesn't mean that you're going to come to full agreement. It may mean that you don't come to any agreement other than we agree to disagree. But have we created an environment where we can exchange these ideas so that it may shift somebody's perspective, right? It may open somebody's eyes and ears to, wow, there might really be an issue here. And we really need to do something about that. And then when you're reflecting, once the conversation is over, really reflecting on what happened and making any types of changes. Is it a policy change? Do we have to move people around? Do we need to implement some type of policy or rule? And most importantly, to ensure that once we have this conversation and we receive this information, some of which we may not like, right? Some of which we may not agree with, that we don't cause collateral damage, that we don't use it to retaliate against someone, that we don't use it, to make sure that they feel uncomfortable, and that we don't take that information and then go talk about it, right? People may exchange in the conversation, confidential information, things that you're going to be privy to just because we're having this conversation, but it's not for you to go put on the internet. It's not for you to go, tell everybody in the office. So it's really important, as the employee, to really show up in your power around what it is that you're trying to get out of it, so that you have a better chance of really creating the change that you want to see. And then if it doesn't happen, at least you showed up powerfully in that space and giving the employer the opportunity to create change, so that when you have the exit interview, right, they can't say, well, I didn't know. No, I told you, but you didn't do anything about it, or you did something about it that negatively impacted me.
Interesting. Very interesting. I like that you said, let's remember this is a dialogue, not a debate. Because if this becomes a debate, then everybody's going to get on the defensive and nothing will get resolved, So I really like that. And we need to keep that in mind. Once you've position yourself to come to your employer, whether it be your first level leader, HR, or whoever, an advocate. Once you position yourself to go there, have the facts, take the emotion out of it, have the facts, line it up so that you can present your case in such a way that it's at least accepted, to the point where someone will say, I will look into this. I'll check this out. Let me see, and what else do you have? And who else should I talk to? Who else has experienced this, So otherwise it's going to be like, well, we're doing it this way because, and you're not going to get anywhere. As a matter of fact, you're going to make things worse. Yeah. And that's going to add to the pressure that busts that pipe. So so we definitely don't want to have that happen. So Kelly, tell us a little bit about, what you do for clients and how you come in and your process and things like that.
Yes. So I train leaders and employees on different things. The two main things are unconscious bias, really how to disrupt unconscious bias and create safe, inclusive, and accountable cultures. But with regards to conversations, we have what's called our Convo Catalyst experience. Now, that could be done as a keynote, a workshop. Really, though, what we are trying to get employers to embrace is this Convo Catalyst experience, which is an interactive workshop. So one of the things that we did was to develop these cards that have different scenarios that employees can use. It can be used as an icebreaker. It can be used in a team meeting. We also have a workbook in my book, The Convo Catalyst. So it's a real experience of being able to dive in And in the workshop, it's about helping them go through the process. So taking these cards, taking these scenarios, and actually working through them, right? So preparing for the conversation. Okay, now let's have the conversation and let's follow up after the conversation. What are the things that we need to do? So it's not just, it can be just about teaching them, right? Because sometimes just depending on how we set up the training, so it might just be a training, they still get all of the, the perfect framework and how to leverage it. But the actual Convo Catalyst experience is an interactive workshop where we're actually working through the pieces and having these conversations. I did this couple years ago with in New Jersey with their school leaders. And it was so fascinating, right? To really watch them go through these scenarios and have these conversations, because we don't realize how much of our biases enter into having these types of conversations, right? I also did a similar exercise with some state attorneys the other day, really thinking about how their biases show up, right, in what they're doing and how they're making decisions. And so my goal is to get people talking. My goal is to get these workplaces talking, because I know from trying these cases, it could just be one thing in an email. It could be that one thing that you didn't say. It could be that walking by the person and just acknowledging them, that all of a sudden just creates this firestorm inside of the organization, that a well-meaning, well thought out, well prepared for conversation could really just, minimize the risk. It'll never go away because people are people. But if you have an organization, I always tell people that, when people trust the process, they may not trust they may not believe in the outcome. They may not agree with the outcome. When they trust the process, then you're in good hands, because they're like, yeah, I don't agree with you. I don't agree with what you decided, right? I used to do investigations. I wrote a book on conducting investigations. They may not agree with how your findings, but they will trust the process. And so that's what this is to really create a process for engaging in these conversations. And if everybody in your organization is trained on how to have these conversations, everybody's on the same page. Everybody's on the same, wavelength about how we're going to communicate. And they can say to each other, no, let's step back, right? Remember, when we're engaging, this is a dialogue. When we're engaging, we got to mind our manners. When we're engaging, words matter, right? So now everybody is on the same page about how to communicate, and it will just make for a better organization.
Yes, awesome, awesome. Well, Kelly, this has been really a fascinating and eye-opening discussion that we've had, and I really appreciate your time. So, for those leaders out there or employees who are more interested in learning more about creating inclusive cultures and the conversations and how we can get around some of the fear of having these conversations, and they want to talk with you about it, how could they reach you?
The best thing to do is go to my website, Kelly Charles Collins with an S on the end.com. And then you can find everything there. You can find how to contact me. You can book a call with me. All my stuff is there. So kellycharlescollins.com.
Okay, awesome. And we'll be sure to put that in the marketing material when the show airs. So, Kelly, thank you again so much for your time today and all these nuggets that you've shared. We really appreciate here at Team Building Cultures. We really appreciate you, sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us and getting all this information from a previous employment attorney. So, yeah. It's great stuff. So thank you so much all for joining us for this episode of Team Building Cultures. And again, I am your host, Beverly Hathorn, owner of Strategic HR Consultants, where we believe that an organization's culture is the soil in which all things grow. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Team Building Cultures. We hope we have delivered helpful and enlightening information to help you create your dream team. Join us next time